Dr. Claire Lawson had spent the last 15 years inside the minds of monsters. As one of the most respected forensic psychologists in the country, she had interviewed some of the most depraved serial killers, dissecting their twisted logic to help law enforcement bring justice to their victims. She prided herself on her ability to recognize evil, even when it hid behind the most charming of smiles. And yet, she had missed it. She had missed him. It had started like any great romance. Claire had met Adrian Calloway at a crime symposium in New York. He was enigmatic, intelligent, and impossibly charismatic. As a criminal defense attorney, Adrian was the kind of man who could win any argument, charm any jury, and captivate any room. And he had captivated her. Despite her expertise, despite the years she had spent studying the warning signs of psychopathy, she had fallen for him. Hard. Their love burned fast and hot. Within a year, they were married, and Claire had never been happier. Adrian was everything she had ever wanted: attentive, passionate, and endlessly supportive of her work. When she came home exhausted from grueling cases, he was there with a glass of wine, a warm embrace, and a knowing smile. He was perfect, too perfect. The first red flag had been subtle. A case she was working on. A particularly brutal set of murders involving a methodical killer who left behind cryptic messages carved into the victim's skin, seemed to agitate Adrian in a way that was unusual. He was always interested in her cases, but this one unsettled him. "Maybe you should take a break from this one, Claire," he had murmured one night as they lay in bed. "It's getting under your skin." She had dismissed it. After all, Adrian hated seeing her stressed. But when he brought it up again, this time with an intensity that bordered on desperation, her instincts prickled. Then came the moment that shattered her world. One night, while Adrian was away on a business trip, Claire had been going through old case files in their home office. She had been organizing her notes on the cipher killer, the psychopath who had been carving coded messages into his victims. She reached for a forgotten folder tucked at the back of her filing cabinet, only to find a set of photographs that didn't belong. Crime scene photos. Unreleased crime scene photos. Her blood turned to ice as she sifted through them. These images had never been made public. The police had kept certain details secret to help filter false confessions. But Adrian, he had them. He had all of them. Her fingers trembled as she noticed something even more chilling. A small handwritten note tucked between the photos. One that simply read, "Are you ready to see me for who I really am?" A sickening wave of realization washed over her. Adrian wasn't just interested in her cases. He was the cipher killer. Her stomach lurched as she forced herself to think clearly. He wasn't home yet, but he would be. And when he walked through that door, she would have to pretend she knew nothing. If he even suspected she had discovered the truth, she wouldn't live to see the morning. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to run, but she knew she couldn't. Not yet. If Adrian was the cipher killer, he had spent years hiding in plain sight, outwitting law enforcement and evading capture. If she made one wrong move, she wouldn't just be his wife. She would be his next victim. She had to play the game, and she had to win. Swallowing her terror, Claire carefully placed the photos back, smoothing them over as if they had never been touched. Then, she took a deep breath and picked up her phone, her fingers steady as she texted Adrian. "Claire, I miss you. Can't wait for you to come home." Seconds later, 3 dots appeared. "Adrian, I miss you too, darling. I'll be home soon." As she stared at the screen, heart pounding, she forced a smile. The most dangerous man she had ever studied was the one she had married. And now she had to find a way to survive him. On his arrival, Adrian suspected something was wrong. Claire was too calm, too normal. If she had discovered his secret, wouldn't she have been different? Wouldn't she have flinched when he touched her, avoided his gaze? But she hadn't. Everything remained the same. Or was she pretending? Adrian needed to be sure. And so he began to change. The devoted husband, the loving partner, he erased it all overnight. He became cruel, unreasonable, snapping over the smallest things. He criticized her cooking, mocked her work, and accused her of being distant. When she protested, he laughed coldly, pushing her further into silence. Claire endured it all, playing her part with precision. But behind closed doors, she was gathering evidence, secretly copying Adrian's documents, comparing his handwriting to the ciphered messages. Every piece fit too perfectly, and then she found something else. A file hidden beneath layers of locked folders on his laptop. A case from 25 years ago. The brutal murder of Detective Henry Lawson, her father. Her breath hitched as she read through the reports. The police had ruled it a botched robbery, a random act of violence. But Adrian's notes told a different story. Her father had been investigating a then-unknown serial killer. A young, reckless murderer testing his skills. The first confirmed kill of the cipher killer had been her own father. A strangled sob escaped her throat as the memories crashed over her. Her mother's descent into depression. The years of poverty. The struggle to survive. Adrian had stolen everything from her before she had even met him. And she had married him. She was married to a monster, and she needed to stop him before he stopped her. One evening, Adrian returned home early, his eyes dark with suspicion. He had found her hidden notes. The moment their eyes met, Claire knew he knew. Without warning, Adrian lunged at her, his hands closing around her throat. "You should have stayed blind, Claire," he hissed. "I could have let you live." She struggled, clawing at his arms, gasping for breath. Just as her vision began to fade, the front door burst open. "FBI, hands where we can see them." Adrian was ripped away from her, tackled to the ground as armed agents swarmed in. Claire collapsed, coughing and trembling, as Adrian screamed, his facade shattered. The trial was swift, the evidence undeniable. The man who had charmed the world was unmasked as a remorseless killer. Justice had prevailed. But as Claire sat in the courtroom, watching Adrian's final venomous stare, she knew one thing for certain. She had survived the monster, but she would never escape the nightmare. Adrian's arrest sent shockwaves through society. The revelation that the celebrated defense attorney was a ruthless killer dominated headlines for months. The victims' families found closure, and law enforcement agencies reevaluated their methods, determined never to let another predator hide in plain sight again. For Claire, the ordeal became both her greatest trauma and her greatest triumph. Her career skyrocketed. She was invited to speak at global crime symposiums, her expertise now holding even greater weight. Her book on the psychology of hidden predators became a bestseller, warning others of the dangers lurking behind carefully constructed masks. More importantly, her case inspired policy changes. A new initiative was launched to train law enforcement in recognizing manipulative psychopaths, ensuring that monsters like Adrian would be caught before they could claim more victims. Though the scars remained, Claire had turned her pain into purpose. She had faced the abyss and survived. And because of her, the world was a safer place.